They're really totally contradictory. Why? Because one's on the side of Klippa and one's on the side of Kiddusha. And what is the symbol of the side of Kiddusha? On the Dalit is this little Yud on the back of it. Because the Yud represents making yourself small and contracting yourself and being a makabel, being a receiver, to the point that leis le magar maklum, that she has nothing of her own, and therefore she's able to receive sort of the infinite inside of her. In other words, when you're talking about receiving from Kiddusha, the smaller you make yourself, the more Kiddusha you can get. If you leave something of yourself, so you're never going to be able to get the entirety of God, basically. You can't really be a makabel if you're there. So by being an empty vessel, mamish, that's what the poverty of malchus represents, which is really not poverty at all. It's really like a very amazing thing, because she's able to be the receiver of all the lights above her. And that is because of the Yud. So we'll take it from there, which is Hainu bitul anachas atzmusa lagabi shara sfiros. The line starts atzmusa. About 12 lines down. Asher bezeh hari hinasis bechinas kli lekabala. And that's how she becomes a proper vessel to receive. Kamaimer kli rekan machzik male einu machzik. And this is the statement that it says a empty vessel will hold something. A full vessel won't be able to hold what you put into it. It's already got filled with its own. So at the idea of emptying yourself out. But kamo makabel hine bichdeshia kli lekabala. So any receiver, in order to be a vessel for reception, it could only happen when you're in a state of absolute nullity and lowliness. In other words, like we've been saying, you leave yourself out of the picture altogether. Only then can you actually get what's being told to you and what's being taught to you. So now he goes into a sort of heavy-duty level of what it means to be an attentive student. That it's not enough, the Talmud is not in a level of yesh and metzias. In other words, that goes without saying, that if he's like holding on to his own opinions, and he's like sort of like in an argumentative state with the Rav, for sure he's not going to receive what the Rav has. He's busy telling himself what he has. But that's obvious. He's saying, Kim dafka kasher yeh bechinas bitul v'heder ha-metzias. He has to be in a state of complete bitul and absence of existence altogether. V'kol ma shemetzamtzem is atzmo yosef b'bitul shalo, and all the more that he'll get himself out of the way, hine yosef v'yosef tia kabbalah, more and more will he receive. Especially when we're talking about receiving something which is completely be'ein aruch. In other words, we're going to see in the next mimer that we're going to learn, the Rebbe is going to really go into this topic for like pages and pages. This meaning of this bitul, what does it mean? But in general, there's two ways of receiving something. When you're trying to receive something that's be'erich to you, or be'ein aruch. Be'erich means something that's basically just a more complicated idea that you've never heard before. Like everything we learned in Chassidus class, basically, in a certain sense, is like be'erich. You know, you're not necessarily. It depends, but it depends who's talking. if the mimer's talking or the rabbi's talking. But in general, when you hear from normal people and you're just trying to learn topics, it's not something that the topic is completely beyond your state of understanding. It's just that if somebody knows something you don't know, so you want to know what they know. So it's called be'erich. You're like your knowledge and your level is compared to the teacher. And therefore, it doesn't require that much bitul. Basically, you can sort of even keep your own ideas to a certain step on the side and just sort of listen to what they have to say. But to receive something which is completely beyond your comprehension, like in other words, to understand what a Rabbi is trying to say, like at the time that he's saying it, and I'm sure you've been by Fabrengens. In other words, to understand, I've listened to Fabrengens. Whenever you're going to try and understand what the Rebbe is saying by a Fabrengen, and the whole sicha, and like sometimes it's a very long thing, you really can't be thinking about anything else at the time. You can't even be like thinking about, he's going to say here, you can't even be thinking about what the Rebbe is saying in the sicha at the time.
Is that why he had the breaks?
You really can't.
Is that why he had the breaks for like 20 minutes and we were singing because
Yeah.
in order to try to figure out what he was saying or try to
Yeah, no, not necessarily only that. I mean, that's for the breaks is definitely a klita of some sort, but I saw a sikha from the Rabbi where he explains in the early years, I don't know if he kept this hanhaga the whole time, but you see in the early years for sure, like, he starts off basically with a little niggin and a mimer.
Right.
And then he comes out and says a bunch of sikhas. So he explained like why he does it like that. And it's exactly this concept. He says, because if I taught, he said, really the truth is a mimer is much more hard to understand, right? But if I taught the sikhas first, which are more easy to understand, a person would be thinking about the sikha, as he said, like you're not, once the Rabbi says, you're not like done with it exactly, it like permeates you for a while. And he would, if he's teaching you a sikha, so when it comes time for the mimer, so the sikha is going to be still in your head. Why? Because you basically get it, you understand it, and while he's busy saying this mimer, which you don't understand, thoughts of the sikha are going to be coming into your head, and that's going to completely destroy your ability to understand the mimer, which is like a higher order of thing and much more sophisticated, much more difficult. He says, so even though, in reality, you know, for the benefit of the listener, it makes sense to go minakala lakaved. You should start off with the light stuff and like build him up, and then have him. He says, but that would confound the senses of the listener to try and hear a mimer having a sikha already be in your head. Like you wouldn't be able to do. You have to be in a state of complete bitul. So this is the idea. In other words, you really can't understand something if you're there, which is a very strange thing. How are you supposed to understand if you're not there? So he explains in the next mimer, the Rabbi talks about it, how it's like a very subtle state. You're still sort of using your intellectual faculties, but he goes into this very unique thing where there's a faculty of chokhmah and there's a faculty of bina. And the faculty of bina comes from the word boneh, which means you're building something. There's one way of thinking where you're putting ideas together and you're building up a concept in your mind. That is great for meditation. He's bonanus. But it's not great for being makabel something. If you're busy with your bina while somebody's talking to you, you're not going to really receive everything. So you have to be in this other state of like chokhmah, which is intellectual, but it's a type of intellectualism where it's connected to sight. You know, they say that sight is like chokhmah and hearing is like bina. So sight, what's the kind of concept of sight? You take in the whole thing, like without processing in it. You know, when a sight comes before you, you can sort of see the whole room. I see right now every single person in here. Pretty much I see whatever color they're wearing. I see the shape of every object in the room. There's a lot of details, but at the same time, none of that is actually being processed. It's just like imprinted on me. So this is a type of what he means. Like you have to be. It's not like you're completely passive. On the contrary, it could be a very active type of listening and peering, but there's no you in there.
You can't try to understand it.
Simply put.
You have to just let it come in. It's
Right.
just like when you're listening to someone, but you're already thinking of what you're going to respond, and you're not really.
Exactly. So that's already not malchus of Atzilus, right? Malchus of Atzilus is the master of basically receiving and not being in there, and it's all emphasized by this little yud on the back of it, and that's what it means an empty vessel can hold, a full vessel cannot hold. So kol ma shemetzamtzem es atzmo yoser ba'bitul shelo, the more you contract yourself, hine yoser v'yoser tihya kabbalah, the more and more you'll receive. V'amashal b'zeh ma'achana b'koach hatanua, and the muscle for this is when you're preparing to use your koach hatanua. The koach hatanua is your power of movement, lagbia ezamasa, to pick something up. Right, we have some weightlifters in here. You can help us with this one. So he says there's a perfect muscle for this. When you want to lift something heavy, the masakala ain't a tzricha chana klal. A masakala, a light weight, doesn't need much preparation at all. You just go down and pick it up. But masakaveda, a heavy weight, hine kol masha yitzamtzim atzmo yoser, the more you'll sort of condense yourself and contract yourself, ba'achana, in the preparation of it, you can then pick up something much, much heavier, right? So you have to like sort of get under it and prepare yourself, and sort of put on like a little belt to make your back okay, and like you have all this like heavy-duty moments of preparation before you actually pick the thing up. What is that? That's basically you're like contorting yourself and making yourself smaller in order to receive something, and that's the idea. The smaller you are, the bigger the object you can pick up. So the same idea is the more you contort yourself and contract yourself with an idea, the bigger of an idea you can pick up as well. So it's all about making yourself small in order to receive. And that's what it says, that the Torah will not be found in those who are called Gasei HaRuach, who are arrogant. V'lo b'mi shemarchiv aleh libo kayam, and not someone who sort of broadens his heart on it like the sea. In other words, you can't be so proud of yourself and come to the Torah with your own positions and attitudes, and certainly not with arrogance. Why? Because it won't be found in you. You won't get the Torah that way. You can't really receive the Torah unless you take the Torah on its own terms. Otherwise, you're having some distorted version of the Torah. The Gasi HaRuach hu she'ein lo bitul. What does it mean? An arrogant Gasi HaRuach won't be found with the arrogant. It means he doesn't have bitul. Umuvan asher eino shaykh lekabel dvar Torah. Clearly, if a person doesn't have bitul, he's not able to receive a Dvar Torah. How many times, we try to talk Torah with someone who's like sort of just coming from other attitudes, doesn't want to hear it. It's a simple fact. He won't be able to hear it. If you're filled with like another idea, you just won't let it in. Your own self will block it out. The Torah requires you to sort of sit quietly and just receive the information. The more you put in, it's just a siman, the less you're actually picking up of the subject matter. There's time to, like as I said, meditate. There's time, once you receive the information, you can sit and meditate on it, and you can use your brain and put it together and sort of build yourself up. But that's already not a time of reception. At the time of reception, you have to get it, and then you can work with the information once you have it. Elagam, so it goes without saying, Gasei Ruach. But even someone, Agam b'mi, asher marchiv aleh libo kayam, even someone who, what does this mean? He spaces out his heart like the sea. That means b'shas limudo einu bato b'tachlis el shu metzias b'einei atzmo. That means it's beyond the level of just being arrogant and sort of not listening. That this guy's already trying to listen, but at the time of learning, he's not completely batul, but he's a metzias in his own eyes. In other words, he, like you said, he's like sort of thinking in his mind like what to say because he wouldn't say it like that, and he's got like a whole like pitch going on in his mind because he sees himself and his opinions as very essential. And this is very subtle, but this is deep. He doesn't mean anything wrong by it, but he says like a student that at the time of receiving from the Rav, he's thinking about that very concept. Right? It seems like harmless, but you can't do that if you're actually going to get it. He's at the time of the actual hashpah, he's thinking in mahar here and thinking over b'hasagas ha'inyan, of grasping the very inyan itself that's before him. Ube'emes tzrich be'eis maseh, and truth, one needs at the time of action rak lekabel, only to be in a state of reception. Divrei Rav. V'achar kach yisbonim b'davar hasagas ha'inyan. Only later, when the Rav is not talking anymore, he can meditate over on the do chazara, think it through on the hasagas ha'inyan, on the grasping of the actual matter. V'choshev b'hasagas ha'inyan kefi chiyuv sichlo. So we're sort of out of the parentheses here. He says this, going back to the point that this is a person who's a matzias in his own eyes. He's going to be the one who's thinking about grasping the inyan kefi chiyuv sichlo. And why is that so bad? Because if he's trying to receive something from a rebbe, the Rebbe might be trying to put something into him which is basically confounds and undoes the way that he thinks about something. We have our certain attitudes about how certain things are. Sometimes you see in a mimer like the Rebbe's bring up a topic he's brought up before, and you're like, yeah, and I know this one, I've heard this one before, and you sort of go fast, where in the end you realize that the Rebbe's saying, through the same concept, you could be saying the exact opposite thing, basically. You see all kinds of maneuvers that take place. So that's the problem. If you're grasping the concept based on your intellect as it's coming to you, you're going to lose it. You never know what's coming in truth. So he's holding on to the concept as his intellect requires. And in short, he's not in a state of absolute bitul b'metzias. Whereas hamakabel ha'amisi, the true receiver, harihu batul b'tachlis, he's completely gone, nullified to the nth degree. V'zeu kol inyan ha-Kiddusha. And by the way, this is the definition of Kiddusha. Right? Holiness means this. It means that you are in a state of making yourself small, taking yourself out of the way, listening to the other guy, listening to the Torah, following the exact details of the mitzvah. In other words, the whole side of Kiddusha is this inyan. I mean, you look at the Kohen, for example, in the Beis HaMikdash, right? There's a whole extra book of laws that just is directed to them. Because the higher you get in Kiddusha, the more subjugated you are to the minutiae of listening and obeying. That's what it is, basically. It's like perfect servitude. It's very interesting. I was just having a conversation with someone last night. It's a Fabrengen, by the way. Today is Mamash Chavdal Davis. We can't go with class without saying it. Alter Rebbe's Yurtzeit today. It's a powerful, powerful day. But we were saying, and the Rabbi himself says it, like in France, the big revolution that came out with liberty and all this matter. What did it do? It basically threw off the yoke of servitude from the world. They're going figured out a way to get themselves into a situation where they don't have to listen anymore, and they convinced themselves that was a positive thing and a forward-thinking thing and like a libertarian type of idea. And the Rebbe basically says it was like the decline of society. In other words, to the point that France represents the symbol of complete haywire, the world going haywire, and there has to be the great correction of the world has to do with correcting that mistake of France. Because essentially what it comes down to is discipline, rules, that's where Kiddusha is found. I mean, if you think about it, the Torah is just a big book of rules, and that's what's called holiness. So we have to put our lives in a certain order that, everything should be in order. In other words, to find yourself in a state of holiness, you have to be asking yourself, what am I receiving right now? Anyway, Bezeh hu kol inyan ha'avoda. So not only is the only whole inyan of Kiddusha, here, I skipped a little line. Sheyeh bechines bitul b'tachlis. Kiddusha is a state of total bitul. U bezeh hu kol inyan ha'avoda. That's what avodas Hashem is. If we're not beinanim, halavai, rasha v'tovlo. But the idea is that if you're going to try and play this game, the secret is you never stop doing something. You never stop having that yoke upon you and receiving orders and receiving instructions. And you're good. The Rabbi says your years are not what it says on your passport. You could be an old man with a white beard and you could be very young. How do you determine? Your Yiddish years, the years of avoda. Because if you're doing the avoda and you're receiving and you're being bitul and you're in part of it, so you're growing. That's life. And if not, you're just delaying your life until such time where you decide to live again. Bitul bechinas malchus. And ultimately, it all comes down to the sphere of malchus. We learned this lesson of how to be a makabel from this dalid. The dalid represents malchus. V'lechein kol hagiluim hu ayidei hashiflus v'abitul bechinas malchus. And that's why, ultimately, Malchus is the source of everything that there is. In other words, certainly when it comes to the creation of the worlds, we know that Malchus of Atzilus is the source of it all. Right? The Bria, which starts creation, is directly underneath Malchus of Atzilus, and the Bria is the beginning of all the worlds of creation. And Malchus, therefore, is the source of everything. So it's interesting, we see here that the same one who's completely bitul also winds up being the source of all life. Why? Because basically, the smaller you make yourself, the more you have inside, and then that all comes out and gets revealed. And as we find a strange duality, basically. Take, for example, speech, which the Rebbe said yesterday in the Maimer, that speech, when it comes to the kochos hanefesh and how do we describe this bitul in one of our kochos, it's called speech. In spheros it's called malchus, and in human characteristics it's called speech. Speech is a funny thing because on one hand we're saying it's completely batul, right? You don't originate your speech with your mouth. You originate your speech with your intellect and then your emotions and then your thought, and then it hits speech and basically it's just opening up the pipe and letting all the things above it come out. But it's funny, because all those other things, they're not able to reveal anything. And speech is the great revealer. In other words, speech, on the one hand, it's busy being so bitul. You think if something is so bitul, it's not the one that has all the power and containing all the light and shining the entire message to the world, right? But on the contrary, he who has this level of bitul, he also is responsible for all the revelations, because that's why he bears all the revelations inside of him. So on one hand, it's not such a bad job to be bitul. You basically wind up being the center stage of all the revelations that come out of you.
Where's this word, shifros?
Lowliness. Kol hagiluim hu adei hashiflus v'habitul bechinas malchus. All revelations come into the world because of the lowliness and the bitul of the sphere of malchus. Does everyone understand that concept?
Yeah.
That all revelation comes from malchus? Yeah? So it's saying even in...
It's just a statement, right? I mean, it's a teaching. When you say understand, what do you mean?
In other words, just like you're picturing in your mind basically how malchus is the source of all creation, basically. All the worlds, basically. Everything there is direct. If it looks up, what does it see? It sees a big sphere of malchus producing it all. It's the producer of all revelation. That's what I wanted to say. And that's basically malchus of Atzilus. There's malchus beyond that, right? And that's what we call malchus de Ein Sof, which basically means that the essence of Hashem, right, which is not necessarily in a state of revelation. The essence of Hashem can be in a state of, off or on. Hester, right, it can be in a state of I'm saying like before anything. And the first thing Hashem did was he came up with this idea in his mind, Ana Emloch, I will reign, I will rule. And he created the first of all things was like the sphere of Malchus. Malchus and Kesser sort of have this, they're the same. And from there, basically, all the infinite revelations of the Or Ein Sof came out. So not only when you look at creation, the source of all things is the sphere of Malchus, but even way beyond creation, all the infinite Or Ein Sof light, where is it shining from? It's shining basically from this thing called the Malchus de Ein Sof, like this essential point that Hashem created to reveal all the Or Ein Sof. So basically, that's what we say. All Giluim comes from the ability for this thing to make itself tiny and therefore receive everything that Hashem has to offer, which also includes basically us. This is our. It's a lesson in Avoda to make yourself small. I think you guys are out of copies here, but just a little bit more. Uvazeh yuvan masha kasuv tafil LaDavid. This we can now understand the verse in Tehillim. Hateh Hashem aznacha aneni. It's Hashem, tilt your ear to me and answer me. Ki ani ve'evyon ani. Because I am poor and destitute I am. Right? So, tafil LaDavid, what's the name of tafil LaDavid? Who is kashrus bitul de bechinas malchus. Right? David, it's interesting, his name is basically two dalids in it. But anyway, everyone knows that David represents the sphere of malchus. In the chariots, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and David. So David is davening. What does it mean, a prayer of David? So it's the prayer of malchus of Atzilus, basically. And what is the prayer of malchus of Atzilus? His kashrus bitul. It wants to join. It wants to receive. It wants to connect itself to what's above it. That's the whole yearning of malchus. It doesn't have anything of its own. All it wants to do is receive. So it's like a prayer for connecting and nullifying itself. And what does it say? Listen to me, Hashem, answer me, because I'm poor and I'm poverty-stricken. I mean to say, like, if you don't give it to me, I have nothing. Hine godel tokef habakasha, this great strength of request, turn your ear towards me and answer me. Mipnei mahu lefi da'ani ve'avyonani. Why does it come? In other words, where does this great request come from? That you're telling Hashem, answer me, because you are poor. Shu bechinas bitul de bechinas malchus. And it was because you have such an unbelievable bitul, you can sort of demand, Hashem, come to me, answer me. In other words, you have Hashem's attention because that's what He wants. He's looking for a place that's nullified so that He can fill it. Because if you're full, He can't really be there. He can't really show Himself in such a place. V'zehu ha'os dalid, and this is what the dalid represents. Masha enkin reish ein bo yud. And going back to our little story here, the reish does not have that yud. She'ein bo b'chinas bitul, and that means it's a different type of poverty altogether. It's not a poverty because you're making yourself small and you're wanting to receive. Adarabah, hu b'chinas yeshus v'gasus. It's the exact opposite. It's without a yud. It's a state of total arrogance and making yourself big. But really, that's really what makes it an impoverished state. In other words, that's real poverty. The poverty of the Dalit is actually unbelievable wealth. As we just said, when you open your mouth, everything comes out. It's like the source of all revelation. It's filled with God. It's just making itself small. But in compared to like everybody else, he's like as rich as you can possibly be. There is no such thing as riches and revelation and wealth except for from Malchus. Like all what you have comes out from your speech. So it like ultimately it's extremely rich because it's busy making itself poor.
So malchus is
That's right. It receives everything
So
above
if
it,
receive, then it can create. If it couldn't receive, then it couldn't create.
just like speech. If you don't think, you can't talk, right? If you don't feel, you can't talk. So what it does, it makes creation come out on like a lower level. But when we say lower, what we mean is revealed level. In other words, to show yourself, you can't do it without your speech. I mean, a little bit with like your facial actions and your hand movements, but I mean, sign language is far from where you want to be. You know what I'm saying? You can do a lot more speaking, revealing your inside emotions and everything than you can with your body language, right? So in other words, ultimately, malchus is not, it's not just like doing a favor for the worlds it's creating, it's doing a favor for the world it's coming from. Because it's the ability for God to reveal himself. It's a very serious thing. You know, that's what I'm saying. All the revelations come from the lowliness of malchus. If Hashem didn't have this fear of malchus, he could not reveal himself. Now you could say, well, he's revealing himself. Why does he need to reveal himself? Only for like lower levels, only for the other. But nonetheless, it's called revelation. It's a power of divinity to show himself, and he's withheld that power unless he has the sphere of malchus.
Malchus is supposed to be where? In the body? It's
The mouth. Yeah. Sometimes the feet.
that was the feet, the ground.
Sometimes it's called the feet, but it says in Pesach Eliyahu, Malchus Peh. Torah Shabal Peh Karinan La. Malchus the mouth. We call it sometimes it's called the feet. But they both have a similar function. In other words, they're both basically taking the body somewhere where it can't go on its own. The feet sort of in an active way. The speech is more spiritual, more subtle. It shows, it's like the inner color and dimension of what the person's thinking, feeling. Your feet can't do that type of revelation. You've been wanting to say something for a while.
Oh no, he brings up a good point. He's saying like, is Malchus the only one that has the ability to create the world? Like, could the world come from Atzilus, or is Atzilus?
Atzilus has a malchus in it,
Oh, that's right.
right? Malchus of Atzilus, we're saying.
Right. Okay.
No, but every sphera
Oh yeah.
has a malchus,
Yeah.
and only through that malchus of that sphere is that the sphere have a chance to show itself. Malchus is the kli, the only thing. Malchus is basically called a kli.
Yeah.
Put it like this: in a certain mimer from the Rebbe Rashab, he explains that really, in general, you have light and vessel, and really every sphere has both light and vessel, but the higher spheres like Chokhmah, it's basically just about all light. And the lower spheres like Malchus is basically just about all vessel. And in general, Malchus compared to all the other spheres is like the Kli. And what does the Kli do? And therefore every sphere itself has a Malchus. In other words, so what does the Kli do? The Kli is what enables you to pour something out and it doesn't spill over the floor. It enables you to hold something, to show yourself, So that's what we're dealing with. In other words, you can't express yourself in any way unless there's some vessel to hold you. Especially for Hashem, if he doesn't have the vessel to hold him, it just dissipates back into himself. He does, the purpose of expressing yourself doesn't work unless your expression is held and can be seen in a vessel. So so this is Malchus is okay. So whereas the Reish, we're explaining the difference of, they're both called poor. Right, but the difference is that the Reish is mamish poor. Because it doesn't mean he doesn't have any money. Actually, he could be rich, but the point is that he's poor in terms of he holds himself very high, and he's therefore unable to receive any godliness. He's poor of godliness. He does not want to receive. He does not want to put on. He's French, right? He's rebelling. He's got a revolution cooking. So basically, I don't know. He's on his own. He's deciding. He's got his own rules, his own conduct. He's going to create his own society. So in his own mind, he could be rich, but the fact of the matter is, when it comes to actually receiving real life force, he's completely cut himself off. Because the only way to receive godly life force is to go and get it, make yourself small, come behave properly, get in line and follow the rules. But the Reish, Ein Bo Yud, it doesn't have the Yud, Ein Bo Bitul. It doesn't have this Bitul. The Adrabu, the Bechinas Yeshus V'Gasus. It's in a state of total arrogance. V'lechein hu ma'asvin dis chaziyu al sitra bisha. And that's what we said before. It's one of the letters that holds itself and shows itself on the dark side, or the bad side, the sitra achra. Va'anius va'adalus the sitra achra, and the type of poverty and poorness that's found in the sitra achra, hu she'ein lem shaychus elukus. They have no connection to God. That's what means they're called poor. And godliness, is life. It's the good stuff. So in other words, That's what it means they cut themselves off. V'zeh atzmo ma she'ein lem shaychus elokus v'anius v'adalu shelahem, and this itself, that they have no connection to godliness, and that their poorness and their lowliness, b'zeh gufa harihu naisim b'chinas yeshim b'tziyas yosef v'yosef. This itself makes them further and further become poorer and poorer. In other words, the lack of the yud is a slippery slope. Once you are not connected to God, you're going to get more and more and more not connected to God. In other words, your arrogance builds and builds and builds in this realm. So that's why it's on the side of the Sitra Achra. It's just basically it's like a klippa machine. Not having bitul leads to further and further and further steps away from Kiddusha. Kitzer, Dalid, V'reish, Shneim, Perush, Dalus, they both mean poor. Bedalid, Kiddusha. On the Dalid side is on the side of Kiddusha, it has the Yud Ma'acharav. It has a Yud behind it. And Tachlis Abitul, and that represents perfect humbleness, humility. V'alidezehu Klila Kabbalah. And therefore it's able to receive, to be a vessel of reception. Yamshil B'talmid, this is compared in a mashal to a student shetrichlos behedra matziyas be'esa Kabbalah, who needs to be an absence of self at the time of reception, and then masha inkin b'os reish, and then not so, the letter reish, it does not have this bitul, etc. Okay, so we've got 15 minutes, but we don't have the copies. But I think what we're going to do is, what should we do? Should we run and make a copy real quick?
Yeah.
I guess that's the best thing we can do. Okay. Dave, you want to do it? You're a copy man? All right. So here it is. Here it is. Basi Lagani. Tafshin Lamed Vav. Maimer Base.
Maybe in the meantime we can do a quick synopsis of what we said.
Yeah, we'll definitely try and use our time wisely. Maybe let me just show you what's happening here. This mimer, or this thing is the whole mimer, okay? I mean, you know what? Maybe you should just do a couple pages now. I mean, if you can do the whole mimer, it'd be good. But if you feel like time is pressed, do a couple pages there. Thank you very much.
It's not in this book, is it?
Not in the book.
What?
No, I don't think it is. No. So the synopsis is basically...
Yeah. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. I mean, this is the spot I put myself in. Mm-hmm. But the synopsis is basically, what are we saying? It starts off Basi Lagani, okay, which is basically the concept of Hashem bringing down the Shekhinah to earth. Yes? Basi Lagani Chosikala is that the statement of Hashem returning to the earth where he originally was, right, because the Shekhinah was in the Tachtonim, in Gan Eden. And basically, it removed itself from there, and from 7 bad generations, and Moshe brought it back down, and he made the Mishkan. So the idea really is that the tzaddik, and many times you'll see in the Basi Lagani Maimers, the Rebbe throws in the words, Va'amech kulam tzaddikim, and your people are all called tzaddikim. Even though the tzaddikim are really doing this, on this Bechina we can all say that we're part of the job of being the tzaddikim, is that our job is to basically return the Shekhinah back down to earth. That's what it means. The Mishkan comes the word Shekhinah, and it's a place that holds God in the world, right? And that's the job of every Jew, and that's the job which we accomplish by the avoda called Hiskafia and Hishapcha. So then he goes into the idea of how is this done? So he says, let's look at the Mishkan itself, and maybe it'll give us a few clues to know how this process is accomplished. So he says everything about the Mishkan, and now he's really going into the letter, the chapter Vav, where we left off, is like really going to the minutia of it, as you'll see, but we'll build up to that. Everything about the Mishkan is basically telling you this same lesson over and over and over again, which is like, how do you bring the Shekhinah into the world? And it's all about transforming the animal into godliness. And that's the secret. And what's the proof is that the great Mishkan, who equals Shekhinah, and the word itself, it comes from the word Shekhinah, it's a symbol of that in every which way you look at it. It's a symbol because the avoda in there was the avoda of literally turning an animal, into God. It's the avoda because you go a little bit deeper and you have the ketores, and you're taking even like the gimel klippas atameas, and you're turning them into God. And then you take the idea of the name of the materials that you use for the atzei shitim, and it's the idea of turning foolishness, animalistic, into God. and making the whole home of the place, like the whole context with which this happens, is defined by transforming animalism into godliness. And then he goes into this whole thing. Why dafka animalistic? Because animal has this unique sort of monopoly on something that the man doesn't have, which is wildness.
Great.
That really, since God is beyond comprehension, it can't be found in the rational brain. It's only found in sort of this like passionate, place where it's sort of lowly in a certain sense, in terms of like you'll only find it by like animals, or you'll find it beyond. But it's a place that cannot be comprehended. It's a place that's just going out of yourself, like kloisa nefesh, just like losing yourself, like a prophecy, like a prophet. You can't be yourself and have it at the same time, because yourself is the idea of putting yourself in boundaries and trying to contain something. You have to give it all up. You have to like lose yourself. And that's like an animal. An animal just has no problem just walking around naked, losing himself, but that's lowly. So the idea is you have to take those qualities that an animal has and use them on the side of Kiddusha. Right? And basically just like be, in a certain sense, wild. But again, what does it mean wild? Wild doesn't mean you have to act crazy. It could be the point of that you're just wild means you're going out of your own bounds of what you consider to be yourself. Like the last example he just gave is that when you're sitting there listening, you don't even think about what's being said. You just like lose yourself. That's the concept of going beyond rationality. Bitul Lagani. So he goes on. Basically, he's got the idea of the Mishkan, what goes on inside the Mishkan, the walls of the Mishkan, and then what are we getting into in Os Vav is the actual name for the boards of the Mishkan. Those things that you turned the Atzei Shitim into, which are called Krashim.
Right.
Okay, so actually we didn't finish the, but
Yeah.
you brought us to the, Rabbi Baruch explained it yesterday in a quick word there, that the word sheker and kesher, okay, which are the two sort of unfortunate words that happen to the shin when grabbed onto by the Reish and the Kuf, who are the bad guys. They create falseness and connection, which means that connection is if you didn't have the shin in there, which is like a letter of truth, the Reish and the Kuf wouldn't even have any connection at all. They would like fall away and like not be there with us anymore. But they take that shin in order to keep evil, so to speak, connected to being alive. Yeah? And those words there, those three letters basically have like a pretty horrible connotation when they come together, right? Both in the Indian of sheker and kesher. And nevertheless, those are the exact same words for keresh, which is the beam of the Mishkan. That you're supposed to take these atzei shitim and turn them into krashim. And this is again the same exact concept of what we just said over and over again, taking the evil of the world and transforming the evil itself, just like moving it around and making it look slightly different, and it becomes the beams of the Mishkan. And you can't make a Mishkan without that. In other words, it's not like pepper up your avodas Hashem with a little wildness. No, there is no such thing as avodas Hashem, except for what the Mishkan shows you. And the Mishkan is all about transforming craziness of the Klippa and the negativity of the world and darkness and turning that into Kiddusha. There's no like middle ground. You can't sort of just like leave the world out of it and say, well, I'll just stay in the tents of Torah all day and I'll serve God that way. It's not called the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is about taking worldly things and transforming them into godly things. That's the Avodah. So it comes back to Iskafia and Hapcha. And basically, the good news is that since you're in an animal body, it's very close to you, this thing, right? That's what he started off with in the beginning when he says that, like, Bechem hadavar talur. When we learn about the sacrifices, Adam ki yakriv mikem. Remember that whole piece? A man, when he will offer, it comes from you, which is good news. Like, you don't have to figure out how to go serve Hashem. You're wrapped in an animal. So everything you do in Avodah is automatically transforming the animal into something godly. That's why Hashem put us into an animal body, because basically He wants us to do this avodah. So there's more and more ways of doing it, but ultimately what He says is that if you have to take your animal out of being an animal altogether. Like the famous story that the Alter Rebbe went to the Maggid of Mezrich to like check it out. He was like he heard that in Vilna they know how to learn, and in Mezrich they know how to daven. The famous story. So he said, I already know how to learn. I'll go see if I can figure out how to daven. So he went there. And he was not impressed. He stayed in the Maggid's court for a week or something. I don't remember how long. And he was going to leave. He's like, okay, it's cool. These guys are doing good. I'll figure my way out in Vilna maybe. And on his way out, the Maggid's son came to him, and he said to him, don't forget to beat the horses until they stop being horses. And he said that one line caught him so much that he made him stay and it made him become like the number one student of the Bible. What's the line? Like, why is that so wild? Because basically, this is the Hasidic doctrine that he gave him in that one line. In other words, you have to beat your horse till it's ois fear. You know, it doesn't. It's not a horse anymore, which is the concept of taking yourself and completely transform. You know, because what was the avodas Hashem up until there? Musar, basically. You know, you're beating the horse as a career's plan. There's no goal of why you beat the horse and what you're trying to do with the horse. You're trying to kill the horse, basically. But the problem is you need the horse. So you have this whole... He basically gave him a new direction in life with that line. Beat the horse until it stops being a horse. And basically, that's what we're saying. In other words, you want to take your animal body. You're walking around. You're an animal. You're in this world. But what he starts talking about at the end of Basi Lagani, your eating habits, your eating times, your sleeping times, all natural, normal things, and you are put in an animal body to have these things, but nothing is taken for granted. Every moment of your physical animalistic existence is about taking it out of being a horse, you know, and you have to beat it. So it's a skafi and hapcha. You have to beat it until you transform it and take it out of this place. So that's basically the summary of the things up until now.
That's why with Esav had the wildness in it, but he never didn't get what he needed to transform it. That's why he has the potential to even be higher.
Yeah, he was the tohu energy.
Same thing with Paro. It says in the Parsha.
Yep. All the bad guys. No, seriously, Lavan, Paro, Esav.
But they're not transformed.
Well, they represent basically the fallen version, you know? In other words, what is the animal? Where does the animal come from in this world? We know, right? It's basically, it comes from higher than the man, but it broke and fell lower than the man. And that when we talk about this in different times, that's why, for example, we have to eat animals. And what is the concept of eating animals or eating plants? Is that we see to a certain degree that our life depends on them. They're higher than us. In other words, like we said in another mimer about the earth, you walk on it, and so forth and so on, it's like lower than you. But on the other hand, hold on a second, everything comes from the earth. Like, if you think again, this giant entity that's below us is totally giving us life. We couldn't live for 1 second without it. So there's this dualism, basically, where you see that the lower entities of reality, you can see in them, Hashem put a remez, a hint in them, that they are really higher than us. They sustain us, for example. So in other words, that's the whole idea of transforming the animal into godliness, is that in them is this high, wild source, but because it's wild, it can't be on the side of Kiddusha. It has to fall. So it fell, but it still has all this power in it, but now we have to come around and take it and utilize it for Kiddusha. So in other words, the rational man is not, we're not knocking him out, you know, but the idea is that really you're using your rationality to determine what can be eaten and what can't be eaten, and you're determining which part of the crazy lower world you're going to dive into. So you still need your rationality to direct you so that your shtus doesn't go in the wrong direction.
But there aren't many characters in the Torah that really transform. I mean, maybe Pinchas took his wildness and transformed it. But you think that Torah would have examples of transformation?
It's interesting. Yeah, it's a very interesting point. I mean, I think to a certain sense it says that tshuva is higher than Torah. Right? Tshuva is higher than Torah. Because if you ask the Torah, thanks, Levi. If you ask the Torah what should happen for a person who gets punished, he'll say this and this and this is your punishment. Whereas if you do tshuva, it's like you can erase your punishment altogether, as not it was never even there, or more so it was considered. Right? So where's that? It's not really in the Torah. Just like it says, like. So in other words, you don't really find all that many examples, I guess, in the Torah of tshuva, because tshuva is pushed above the Torah. Like you're not going to see that in the Torah. What you're going to see in the Torah is wicked and righteous. You know what I mean? Right. It's like a beyond.
Sons of Korah.
Yeah, but again, even in the Torah, that we don't find out about them in the Torah.
We just hear it. We don't know anything about really what they did.
You see it in like Rashi. You know, you don't see it in the.
It's this week's parsha when they do the names of the descendants of Levi.
Right.
They mentioned this whole thing with the Ramban goes into the whole thing with the tshuva.
Yeah.
It doesn't say in the text.
Right. So I'm saying, like, It's not in
In
the.
the text, it doesn't tell you how to do tshuva, but in the Devarim, it all talks about, the hashivcha,
Right.
and the tshuva. It says return, return, return. It doesn't tell you how to return.
Right. I
It
hear what
tells
you're
you to
saying.
do it. So terrific. Now what do we do? We're going to return.
Yeah, I'm taking this concept also from like an Indian of Mesiras Nefesh. It says, Mesiras Nefesh, the Torah doesn't ever really tell you to like die for it, in a certain sense. And but we do. It's like it's inside of us, like that. It's just like because it comes from before the Torah. Same idea that I was just getting to before. It's like the Torah can't tell you that because the Indian of Mesiras Nefesh is above Torah. It doesn't mean you're not supposed to have Mesiras Nefesh with the Torah. It's just that in the realm called Torah, it's already sort of a certain realm of rationality, and the higher aspects are not found in there.
Not shown. He had an element of that.
Yeah, but that's not in the text either.
Exactly.
That's not in the text.
Exactly.
We didn't know who the first guy is who
Yeah.
jumped in.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Again, we learn about these concepts, but not
They're not in the
from
text.
this thing called Torah, like rationalism and Chokhmah. I guess we should call it Chokhmah. These levels which are beyond Chokhmah, they're not in the part of Chokhmah of the Torah, which is called Chokhmah, like the Chumash.
Honestly, I think the closest thing to Mesiras Nefesh is probably Pinchas, in a certain sense.
Yeah.
Just we have to fear God. We have to be all that stuff about God, but doesn't mention anything about Mesiras Nefesh. It doesn't say that it doesn't mention anything. Quite interesting.
I wonder,
Okay.
I wonder if we could say that the reason that Hashem gave the Torah like Moshe's generation, like the way he had to wait for Moshe's generation, is because he had to like wait for the bad to get to a certain point to be able to like flip over the bad. Like, is that why we say like the Torah couldn't have been given earlier? Like why Dafka and Moshe's generation? Like, if the whole thing is we're saying that there has to be bad to flip around.
I was just saying it wasn't bad enough
Yeah.
until his generation.
Yeah.
It's just because they had to go through slavery to get purified.
I know but also there had to be bad guys to make themselves better.
Something to think about there.
Yeah.
I mean, on one hand, they were refining it more and more. All those 7 generations, we know that the Shekhinah was getting closer and closer.
Yeah.
But I hear you. In order to like actually fuse with it, they needed Mitzrayim. They needed
They
like
needed some bad
certain
guys in
level.
order to make them good.
Yeah. Very interesting.
If we're saying the whole thing, the whole Indian is with the sheker and the beams and the animal into the light, and
What time is it?
you need a goyim
Time is
world for the Torah to flip over.
Seems very early.
So we'll set it.
In that case, we're definitely in good shape for Mashiach right
Yeah.
now, huh? Dale, don't forget your.
There's nobody who look like anyway.